Welcome to the United Kingdom, a land built upon the twin pillars of freedom and democracy, a land ruled by King Charles, an unelected chap that owes his great wealth and influence to his genealogy alone, i.e. who blew their beans up who and at what time. And Rishi Sunak, the UK prime imposter that sits in Downing Street, having been put there by absolutely no one at any ballot box, anywhere. It's democracy. These two men lead a nation that they have absolute contempt for. Jimmy Savile's sausage-fingered mate and Roland Ratt's twin brother don't serve the people of these isles. They only serve the warped ideology of an organisation fronted by a professional Bond villain whose head resembles a waxed scrotum. If they cared about the people they're meant to serve, they wouldn't be handing billions of pounds of the taxpayers' purse to the green track-suited leader of one of the world's most corrupt nations, while British people choose between starving and freezing. They wouldn't be escalating the war in Eastern Europe that will no doubt lead to the deaths of countless Britons, because let's have it right. When the British long-range missiles that Sunak's just handed to the welfare queen start hitting Russian cities and killing Russian citizens, there will be repercussions and they'll be aimed in our direction. They wouldn't be housing economic migrants that have entered the country illegally in hotels at the now skint taxpayers' expense, while the streets of this country are littered with homeless British citizens. They wouldn't allow foreign energy companies to exploit and bleed the people dry like a broken radiator while boasting record-breaking quarterly profits. And they wouldn't be following every cult agenda script ordered from those they truly serve, whether it be the net zero scam, the sexualization of children, digital IDs, central bank digital currencies, or the dystopian wet dream that is the 15-minute city. Last week in Oxford, the public took to the streets to protest against the newly imposed Hunger Games-style split districts of one of England's most famous cities. People from all walks of life, many whose businesses and day-to-day lives are being impacted by these restrictions on travel, all in the name of fighting the invisible climate change bogeyman, came out in numbers, only to be predictably labelled as far right. Isn't it funny that anyone who doesn't agree with the pre-agreed narrative is far right these days? Now, whether they are or not is of little concern. The media will simply print it with the same reckless abandon they did when they claimed it was safe and effective. It is as predictable as Antifa turning out to counter-protest. A gaggle of prepubescent melts took a break from masturbating in their mums' basements to cover their faces and protest against the protesters. A group of useless idiots whose only claim to moral virtue is that they're anti-fascist, as if 99.999% of the world's population doesn't also fit that description. They once again turn out to fight on the side of the establishment. If your rebellion consistently aligns itself with the Davos elite and multi-billion-pound corporations, maybe it might be time to hand in that insurgent card, because you aren't actually that rebellious after all. When you act as a protection racket for the hounds, you don't get to call yourself a hare. Them's the rules.
For me, I don't go down the fight back route. Short term, yes, plan for it. I think that this is a juggernaut that has to go off a cliff. And if we try and get in front of it to fight it, we're going to go off the cliff first. I think we need to sidestep it. There is alternative currencies being created. There is local currencies, complementary currencies. In the short term, what people can do is, if you have a mortgage, get on a long-term fixed interest rate. At least then you know where you're going to be. If you have savings in the bank, you are losing, let's be realistic, 20% of your purchasing power year on year. So you need to stop delegating that responsibility away, look towards saving in precious metals, which are the number one hedge against inflation, but physical precious metals, that's what people can do in the short term. In the long term, we're going to have to look at taking responsibility and moving into decentralized finance. Not particularly, when I say decentralized finance, people always jump onto crypto. I would have my issues with crypto, but we have to move away from delegating responsibility. So that would be a long term. And there is these grassroots organizations starting to rise to create something different.
Can legal routes work? Whenever I talk about this stuff, people will say, well, aren't the courts owned by the very people you're kind of trying to hold accountable? What would you say to that?
It's really difficult. It's difficult now because we're dealing with a situation where across the board in the UK and everywhere else as well, but specifically we're looking at the UK, everybody has been affected by the propaganda. And that goes right through to the judges, the lawyers, everybody. So when you start to discuss these things in a courtroom, you're basically working against the psychology that's been, put into people's minds. So yes, it is difficult. I mean, people say that the legal system is corrupt or flawed or broken. Essentially, Gareth, in this country, we've got hundreds and hundreds of years of common law, and the people make the common law. And this common law has evolved, and it evolves through cases. So every case in the UK, every case must be tested on its merit. So it's a case-by-case basis. And when you have a groundbreaking case, that judgment in that case can set rules for future cases.
The intimidation is just about silencing you. But once you get past the point of, as we have, and I'm sure you have now, you get past the point of, you realise that just being called names doesn't mean anything. It's just names and whatever. And it's not going to stop me saying what I believe. And so we'll keep doing it,
Yeah, 100%. And, I got one thing to say to your audience, and that is this, overcoming that fear is like building a muscle. Courage is a muscle. The more that you speak out, the more that you tell the truth in the face of opposition, the stronger you're going to get, the more courageous you're going to get. And oh, by the way, the more people around you are going to be given permission to do the same. They're going to speak up as well. And you will have a team around you, surprisingly. I mean, sometimes you may stand alone. And in those times, you still need to speak the truth because people are watching. So yes, it's, building your courage takes time, but it gets easier as you do it. And it sets you free. It really does.
Absolutely.
One of the board members is in a polo club not too far from me, the Wellington Polo Club. It's a famous English name. And he also is the heir of a yacht company. So these are the people that engineered a coup on James O'Keefe, a yacht guy who also plays polo on the weekends here in Florida.
See, I don't want to be judgmental, George, but I'm going to be. The idea of someone that is a yacht guy at a polo club, that doesn't tend to fit with the kind of people that would be breaking stories, bringing down big pharma and big corporations.
Right. Well, he's only been with the company 4 months, and where they got into a problem was this meteoric story that they did about Pfizer and this Jordan Walker with this hidden camera. And they had 10 times more views on social media than they'd had ever before. So the success kind of rushed to their brain, the adrenaline rush. And then there seemed to be a scramble for power and editorial control. And this guy named Hinckley, Barry Hinckley, the yacht family, very famous yacht family here in the United States, Newport, Rhode Island, was brought in 4 months ago to sort of steer the boat. I'm not sure he did a very good job, but James got into a fight with him and fired him. And the board had an emergency meeting, and then they reestablished this yacht guy. So James walked out yesterday. He cleaned out his stuff out of his drawer and then took off. So he's no longer at Project Veritas, and they've been hemorrhaging. Project Veritas has been hemorrhaging followers ever since.
We are now closing in on our 100th episode. And so I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for supporting what we're trying to do. Ickonic only exists because of your support, and that fact isn't taken for granted. A massive thanks too to all of our guests over this nearly 2-year period. They've put their head above the parapet to come on the show and speak to us, often about sensitive topics. Sensitive in the sense that it's something that challenges the pre-agreed narrative, but also personally sensitive. It takes courage to sit in front of a camera and share your personal stories with a relative stranger and, of course, all of our viewers. Things are slightly different now, of course, as events have shown us to have been correct on many subjects we were labelled crazy for questioning. But in the early days, people were taking a risk talking to an Ike. We had many guests, including doctors and sitting members of parliament, booked to come on the show who pulled out when they realised they would be tarred by association. The Ikes are dangerous don't you know? Now is a critical time because as the tide is turning post-pandemic, people have allowed themselves to become complacent, which I totally understand. We're all crisis fatigued, and that, of course, is by design. From one manufactured fear to the next takes its toll on all of us, but we need to remain on alert, as we did during the Rona era, ready to jump up and push back against the next mandate, the next lockdown, or the expansion of the rollout to include the kids, all these different things. Because it's no coincidence that those nations that were pushed further into tyranny during that period were the ones with the least pushback from the populace. Compliant sheep will always be the first to the slaughterhouse. Let's not forget that. But those who say no and stand their ground against whatever it is that's thrown at them, they are the ones that will be left victorious. Fortune favors the brave. It always has. Good night.